for three. Dagger!
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the first ever installment of Well Beyond the Arc. I'm Manoli.
And I'm Montana.
And we'll be chatting NBA basketball over the next hour or so. Glad to have you with us. And Montana, let's get it out of the way right now. I know I'm wearing my Purdue hat. We choked in the Sweet 16 last night. Let me have it. I'm wearing it either way. Let me have it.
Man, honestly, though, that's the game that I did not expect to go like that. Obviously, the team that they played had some luck in the tournament, but we've not seen a team seated right there make it quite this far. At least in my lifetime, I haven't seen a team that I can remember make it that far with that seed. So it's kind of a fun thing to see, but obviously, as a Purdue fan, not something you probably wanted to have happen.
No.
Lots of memes. Memes are going everywhere. That's something that's been filling social media the last 12, 16 hours. It's been all those memes. So I've been enjoying that part of it, but I'm also not a Purdue guy, so that might be
Yeah. No, I'm a Purdue grad. I have not got up early to watch those memes. I was recovering from a hangover from all the drinking I did after the game last night. But neither here nor there. A little bit about us. I am the owner of a little blog that I just started a couple months ago called The Sports Blog. You can visit it. It's thesportsblogpage.com.
And I currently have another show I do with one of my buddies. It's called The Connor and Heffernan Show. Currently, we are on Spotify, Amazon Music. You can find us on Podbean, and we're at just that, The Connor and Heffernan Show. Trying to get that Apple certification thing figured out, so then we'll be on Apple Podcasts soon. But as of now, we're just rocking on 3 platforms. But you can find us also on Twitter and TikTok, also as The Connor and Heffernan Show. So that's another thing that I've got going on.
All right.
So moving right along, obviously this NBA season has been nothing short of crazy. We've seen a lot of teams we thought would be in one
MVP race is heating up. Right now, I mean, there might be some different candidates and maybe a different winner at the end of the year than there was at the beginning of the year as far as an MVP frontrunner. But who do you have? Who's your top 5 on your MVP power rankings?
Currently, I have Joel Embiid sitting on top. He's been having a very consistently solid season, putting up 29.8 points per game, 11.3 rebounds per game, and 4.3 assists per game. I've got him sitting right at first. Right behind him at number 2, I have Nikola Jokic from Denver, 26.2 points per game, 13.5 rebounds per game, and 7.9 assists per game. And then sitting right behind him, I've got Giannis. Obviously, Giannis has been in the conversation the last few seasons, and he's still right up there. He's one of the best, 29.7 points per game, 11.6 rebounds per game, 5.8 assists per game. And then Jason Tatum, I've got Jason Tatum sitting right at 4th, another player that's had a solid season, especially the second half. And then I've got LeBron sitting at 5. Obviously, that he's not made that power ranking yet. On some of these national rankings that I've seen. But LeBron has been putting up monster numbers and is the only reason this Lakers team is even where they're at this point. So I've got LeBron sitting at 5th, and I think if he really closes the season like he has been, I think he could bump his way up to a top 3 spot. But as of now, I've got Joel Embiid sitting right on top. Just he's been consistently the best this whole season.
Okay, that's a very interesting top 5. I have some similar names. If we were to say at the All-Star break who is winning the MVP right now, I definitely agree with you and have Joel Embiid at the top. However, we got the whole season is 82 games and they don't hand out the MVP awards at the All-Star break. Before I give you my 5, what is your MVP criteria? What makes an NBA MVP in your opinion? And I'll share some of my thoughts, but just curious.
Yeah, and that's a great question because I think that the way this race is figured out, I think sometimes certain things get overlooked. Obviously, it's not a completely flawed system because we've seen some very deserving winners the last few years and just throughout history. But I really look solely on. I don't just look solely on stats. At the end of the day, we see a lot of these players putting up these really big numbers, but I also look at like impact on the floor and impact on your team. I think some of these teams that have these amazing records, they have stars that are putting up these numbers that are great. But then obviously on the lower end of the spectrum, we've got these teams that kind of have a player like LeBron, who's the only reason that they're still alive. But he's having that big impact and keeping his team alive. And that's why I think he's an MVP. So I kind of look at not just our stats and like, how many points, rebounds, blocks, but I also look at their impact on the court with their team. So for me, it's kind of a duo mix. It's both stats and then it's also overall impact for the team and for where they're at in the rankings.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of it. I mean, a lot of people have that debate of, okay, is it the most valuable player or is it the best player on the best team?
Mm-hmm.
And that can go back and forth. For me, the MVP is someone who, the way I look at it is you take that person away from that team and they're not the same team. Combination of that, combination of stats, is their team winning?
Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal to me. I mean, what's the point of being, the NBA's, and this isn't me ripping LeBron, and I know I've been known to do that in my blog a little bit, but what's the point of being the NBA's first, second, third leading scorer when your team doesn't make the playoffs? Now, I will give you this. I have no idea where the Lakers would be without LeBron. Actually, I do. It would not be anywhere close to the playoffs right now. LeBron is single-handedly imposing his will in trying to keep the Lakers in it. And they very well could make it into that play-in. They can make it into the playoffs, but we'll talk about that more later on. For me, my top five, it's a little bit different, and I'll give you my reasons why. Number five, I'll go from 5 to 1. Number 5 for me is the Wonder Boy Luka Doncic. He's just been putting in another amazing year. I think he got off to a slow start. I don't think he was in the best shape. Maybe was taking the season a little too lightly, but right around All-Star weekend when he was kind of getting snubbed a little bit and not being talked about as one of the better players in the league and a lot, more hype than substance, not being a starter and things of that nature, I think that really started to piss him off. And I think he's been playing at a high level ever since, even those few games leading up to the All-Star game and ever since. And the Mavericks are right now, right in the middle of it in the Western Conference playoff race. You take Luka Doncic away from that team, they're not even close to being a playoff team. And yes, the Mavericks have made some moves to surround him with some solid players, but for me, Luka Doncic is number 5. Number 4, I have Ja Morant. Ja Morant's season this year reminds a lot of people of Derrick Rose's MVP year with the Bulls back in 2011. Similar type player, similar type athleticism. I think Ja Morant's even more explosive than Derrick Rose, if you can believe it. Slightly better shooter, things of that nature. But I have Ja Morant 4th, even though the Grizzlies are probably one of the more surprising teams as far as being at the top of the Western Conference standings. I have him number 4 because the Grizzlies are 13-2 when Ja Morant is not in the lineup. And that's a pretty telling stat. Obviously, you want to have all your players healthy. Obviously, you want to have that type of talent on the floor with you at all times. But it's pretty hard to justify giving the MVP to a player whose team has a better record when he's not on the floor. But definitely deserving of a top 5 MVP ranking. Number 3, like you, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo. He is putting up video game numbers once again, probably for the 4th year in a row. If he continues on this pace, he's going to be in the MVP conversation every year for years to come, with no signs of slowing down. His Bucks are towards the top of the Eastern Conference standings. They are going to be a force to reckon with, and people forget the Milwaukee Bucks are the defending champions, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is a huge reason why that is. My number 2 and number 1 in my MVP race is compared to yours is a little flip flop, and I'll tell you why. Number 2, I have Joel Embiid. Yes, he's been consistent. He has been a beast, and he's been healthy for the most part. And Philly's going to be a force to be reckoned with in the Eastern Conference playoffs as well. In fact, I had him as the MVP winner at midseason, like I mentioned moments before. Beast, the stats you mentioned him a little bit ago. You take him off that team, but you take him off that team, I still think Philly can compete. Not as a top tier Eastern Conference team, but they still have guys. They have Tobias Harris. They have the newly acquired James Harden, which is one of the bigger reasons why I dropped down Embiid, because you have a talent like James Harden. yes, it's going to take away some MVP votes for Embiid. It's unfortunate because he's been a beast all year. But for me, Joel Embiid's number 2. And number 1, I have for winning as the back-to-back MVP winner, Nikola Jokic. Denver has had a number of injuries to put up with and deal with here. I don't know where Denver would be without Nikola Jokic. Similar to how we just talked about LeBron, but Denver's right in the middle of the Western Conference playoff mix. They've had no Jamal Murray for the entire year due to that ACL injury, and not sure if he's going to be coming back or not. Sounds like he may be right before the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Porter Jr., once again, the back has been an issue. They haven't had him for most of the season. He's not going to be coming back anytime soon. So Jokic has been doing it with a bunch of role players.
Mm-hmm.
And the second leading scorer on that Nuggets team right now is Will the Thrill Barton at 14.5 points per game. I think I saw a stat the other day where the Nuggets with Jokic and Barton have the biggest point differential between the first and second scorer on that team. So for me, it's Nikola Jokic winning his second and back-to-back MVP awards.
And honestly, I'm not mad at that list. I think that's honestly, it's very well how that could go. I think Jokic has had an amazing season, as you said. He's been a huge factor in where they've been. And I mean, that Western Conference is as intense and as competitive as it's ever been. Suns are sitting up top with 60 wins, and then right behind them is that Grizzlies team, and right behind them is the Warriors. And the difference between teams from third all the way up to seventh is like under 6 games. So they're all right there in competitiveness. And, that Nuggets team is 6th. And like you said, without Jokic, they would not be in the position they're in. They'd still be a solid team, but they would not be in the position they're in. He's been a huge factor in keeping them competitive. LeBron, for me, is in that top 5 just because of everything that he's been doing for his team. But obviously they haven't been having the wins. So that's been kind of a factor in that. Like, yes, he's been helping keep that team somewhat relevant, but they're still not even in the top 8. So it's impressive, but it goes a little bit overlooked for where they're at seeded wise. But no, I definitely think that MVP race, it's heating up. We may see LeBron get himself in that and within these last few weeks of regular season play. I don't know for sure. There's a little bit of the season left. I don't think he'll win it, but I can see him maybe pushing his way in there because Jason Tatum just got himself in within this last month. Obviously, he's been heating up and having a great second half of the season, but I don't think that top 5 will remain completely solidified. I think we could still see some jumps in the near future.
Yeah. Look, if we were to make this a top 10, LeBron and Jason Tatum would be in my 10. In fact, I wrote down a top 10. I had Jason Tatum at 7, LeBron at 8. One name that neither one of us mentioned, although we mentioned his team, is Chris Paul, CP3. Yeah. You got the Suns with the best record in the team. The jury's out on whether or not that team is for real. But and any love, any votes for CP3?
CP3, and I think he's been a player that's been overlooked a lot of times in his career. There was just something I saw the other day about him being overlooked exponentially this season, not even just an MVP race, just as a player overall. I mean, that is a star that has been putting up these video game numbers for years. I mean, he's been a top player his whole career almost. And I feel like he's gotten overlooked a couple of times. So I honestly, he's definitely in my top 10. Like you said, if this was a top 10, both, Luka's right at 6th for me right now. So him and LeBron were kind of close in my top 5, but right up there is CP3 as well, because he's been a huge part in this Suns turnaround. When they acquired him, we saw a huge change, and it was no accident. He brings so much to each team he goes to that their success is highly part of CP3's presence is a huge part of that.
Yeah. Well, let's see. We'll see if this year is the Suns' year. I mean, I think CP3 would have a lot more MVP votes. Unfortunately, the injury bugs hit him again. That's going to be a big question during these playoffs. Is he going to be able to stay healthy? He played hurt all through the playoffs and in the finals last year. So time will tell.
That's true.
Well, I know you're a big Lakers fan, and the topic that everyone's talking about, are the Lakers going to make the playoffs? Right now, I think they sit at ninth, I believe, with the New Orleans Pelicans right behind them, and the San Antonio Spurs not too far behind them as well. LeBron had come out when the NBA introduced the play-in format, and he wasn't a fan, didn't see a point to that. Now he might be playing in a second consecutive play-in tournament, leading into the playoffs. So, Montana, you're a big Lakers fan. I know you follow them closely.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask you first: are the Lakers going to make the playoffs?
So I do think they're going to make the playoffs. I think they'll, right now they're in that play-in game. They're looking like they'll be in that mix. Right now, it's the Timberwolves, the Clippers, the Pelicans, and the Lakers that make up those four teams that we're looking at for the play-in. The Lakers are highly capable of beating every single team that I just mentioned. Even with their struggles this season, they're a better team than the Pelicans. They're a better team than the Timberwolves, and they're a better team than the Clippers. Obviously, the Timberwolves have made kind of a push, and they've kind of shocked some people and started to look like a really solid team for the future. But this Lakers team that they have now could definitely beat them in that play-in situation. Now, once they get to the playoffs, if they're that eighth seed, most likely they'll be going up against the Suns. Little rematch from last year. Lakers team last year should have beat the Suns. That Lakers team last year, with AD not going down, would have beat that Suns team. That's my hot take. I truly believe that. This Lakers team this year, I'm not quite as confident. So last year, I was like, AD doesn't go down, it's a different playoffs. This year, the Suns have been dominating even more. So I do think that Suns team would knock the Lakers out first round.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
my take is they make the playoffs and they're a first round exit. That's where we're at. And LeBron, I'm not a LeBron fan. I'm a Lakers fan. So like LeBron, glad he's with us. Glad he helped us win that chip. But I don't think LeBron can or should be in a position where he has to carry a team anymore. He left Cleveland for that very reason, and now we're back in a situation where LeBron is carrying a team. So I don't want them to go past the first round. I want them to get out first round and then figure out next season, focus on. And I think that's
Wow.
honestly a lot of them. I mean, yeah, they're going to play
Wow.
hard, but there's been rumors and people close to that Lakers organization that have said this team is just playing for the end of the year. They're ready to be done and look towards the future. LeBron's a competitor. He'll go for it as always. If AD is healthy for a week, if he can stay healthy for a week, then he'll make an appearance and, try to help him out. But I do think there'll be a first round exit and a team that'll try to rebuild this, not rebuild, but definitely make some moves this summer.
They definitely got to do something. I mean, it's only maybe what I'm hearing you say is it's only a matter of time until they're saying 1, 2, 3 Cancun. Well, I mean, it's interesting that, and I actually made a mistake. The Lakers are currently 10th, with New Orleans ahead of them and San Antonio 2 games behind as we're filming today. I actually think that the Lakers, they'll make the play-in, but I think they are going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs. I think that LeBron is definitely imposing his will as it is right now. He is single-handedly, I got to give him credit because it's, he's single-handedly keeping the Lakers afloat right now. At 37, he is doing things that no other 37-year-old in NBA history has done. Right? He's averaging nearly 30 points a game. He could be the first player in NBA history. I'm sorry, the oldest player in NBA history to have a 30-point per game average for a season, and the youngest player in NBA history to have that same average. So the fact that he's even keeping the Lakers remotely close is an accomplishment in itself. But you mentioned Anthony Davis. He lobbied to get Anthony Davis to the Lakers because he wanted to take a secondary role. He wanted to set up AD, and he was supposed to be that guy that pushed the Lakers, to the top. Obviously, they won that chip, like you mentioned. But where's Anthony Davis been? He's been hurt all year, basically. Is he going
Since
to
the
be able to?
championship.
Yeah. Is he going to be able to stay healthy for? I mean, you mentioned a week in jest, but I think you're being pretty serious. Is he going to be healthy for a week? Is he going to be healthy for a game? Is he glass at this point? Is he damaged goods? Those are two big. Those are Anthony Davis himself is a huge question mark for me. LeBron in one game can help you win. I don't know if he can do that over a 7-game stretch. I don't know if he can do that throughout the playoffs. But my hot take is the Lakers are not going to make it past the play-in. especially if they have to rely on some of their older guys. I mean, I'm playing better defense than Carmelo Anthony right now. He's obviously a much better basketball player, much better shooter than I am. But I mean, that Lakers team defensively, I mean, you saw LeBron get frustrated at some of his teammates about a week or so ago, not even boxing out for defensive rebounds. I mean, I think there's just too much going wrong for the Lakers. I think they don't make it past the play-in, but we'll see. If they do, I'd be worried if I was the Suns or the Warriors or the Grizzlies, because that's one dangerous man they have to face. And the Lakers do have a couple of shooters. I mean, Malik Monk has been a bright spot. I mean, you throw it to Melo in the corner, doubling off LeBron, he can hit a shot. And if Anthony Davis can stay healthy, watch out. But those are all big question marks for me. I don't see it.
And I'm right there with you. I think for me, it depends on who they play in the play-in game. Pelican, I mean, the teams that are in front of them, the Clippers, the Timber, I mean, they have better records by far. I mean, the Clippers have a 5-game difference in the Lakers, and then the Timberwolves have an above 10-game difference with wins. So record-wise, this team does not look like they could beat those teams in front of them. But like you said, they've got LeBron. If AD can stay healthy, that LeBron-Anthony Davis connection is the best in the NBA when they're both healthy. The problem is that's not something that we've seen since they won the championship. AD was playing, and this is what I figured out while watching the playoffs, the bubble championship. AD was playing injured the whole playoffs. He had some injuries that were nagging, but he played through them. And then after the season, come to find out that he was playing with a pretty severe injury that was kind of nagging him. And then he came back the next season and we've not seen him I don't think we've seen him in for a full 2 months since the championship. I really don't. I don't think we've seen him stay in longer than a month, maybe a month and a half. But when he's been in, he's been scary. I mean, like last playoffs, when they played Phoenix and he was in, he dominated that team. Single-handedly, he's a huge reason that they were up at a point in that series. So it's all up to a couple pieces. Can you play with Russell Westbrook on the court and not have 6
It's
to
a good
7
point.
turnovers? I mean, you have to
We
also
haven't even
think
talked about him
that.
yet. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a huge, unfortunate dark spot in this team when he was supposed to be such a bright spot. And I never, I never saw that working. I was hopeful. Even up to All-Star break, I was hopeful. Lakers weren't looking good, but I was hopeful. He has a pattern of turning things around second half of the season. He hasn't really done that this time. Don't hate the guy. Obviously, he's an NBA legend, but I want him off the Lakers. He needs to go to another team where he can just be the main guy, the show guy, and because at this point, that's what he's looking for.
Yep.
And it shows.
Keep him in front of you. Let him shoot from the outside. If I'm the Clippers, Timberwolves, or Pelicans, let him shoot from outside. I think he's shooting something like 9% from 3.
Yeah. Awful.
Since the All-Star break. So
if anything, he's gone down since the All-Star break. Like, last year with the Wizards, he had an okay first half of the season. Then after the All-Star break, he was in attack mode. Now it's like the opposite of that. I mean, it's just everything that he has as like a weapon, a good thing on his side, is also a double-edged sword. His aggressiveness, his decision. I mean, it's good, but then we see all these turnovers. I mean, I remember I went to back in December, I went to the Lakers versus the Thunder game because I was sure that the Lakers would beat the Thunder because it's the Thunder. I wanted to pick a game that I was confident in.
And then what happened?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It didn't quite end up how I wanted, but I wanted to film, like get some footage of Westbrook on my phone because I was like, this is a legendary moment. I kid you not, there was not a single video I got of him that wasn't a turnover. So the only thing I got video of at that game was him turning the ball over. And I gave him like 6 tries. I was like, all right, take 3. Oh, another turnover. Give it. But no, that's just been how his season has been. It's been a very unfortunate roller coaster season that's going down more than up. So get him off of the team, look for the future. I know there's a couple big names that the Lakers will be looking into hopefully in just the next few years. But I mean, I think we're on the same page regardless of if they make it into the playoffs or just the play-in. I don't think they're going to make it far. Maybe they could beat the Grizzlies, potentially in a 7-game series. That's the one team I can maybe see them beating. But even at this point, that's a long shot because that Grizzlies team, pound for pound, is a better team than this Lakers team by far. It's not just Ja, that whole team they built around him, 10 times better than this Lakers organization at the moment. So Lakers will probably be an early round exit, but the good news is, they didn't even make the playoffs LeBron's first year there. This reminds me of that season, kind of an underwhelming season, and then they came back and made that championship push. So I do see them doing that this time next year. I see them being in a way different spot, hopefully.
Well, for your sake, here's hoping. But as far as this season, I see 1-2-3 Cancun come happening sooner rather than later. Hate to say it.
Yep. I'm seeing it at this point too, honestly. So I'm with you there.
Yeah. Well, from the Lakers to my beloved Chicago Bulls, we're currently sitting at 42-31. We had spent some time in first place in the Eastern Conference for a good part of the season, but yet the injury bug has hit, and the COVID bug, if you will, has hit the team pretty hard since the beginning of the calendar year. Right now, the biggest thing that everyone talks about with the Bulls are they're 0-16 against teams ranked first through third in both conferences. They've beaten everybody they're supposed to, but against the good teams, they have not showed yet that they can win.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I have my say on this, but do you see the Bulls as a contender or a pretender at this point?
So at this very point for this season, I do see them as a pretender. But in the near future, I see them being a contender. I think my biggest thing with them is, like you said, that 0-16 record does not look good because even if you can play some of those bottom tier teams at the beginning of the playoffs, you're going to come head to head with some of those top teams most likely when it matters. And I think that this Bulls team has shown that they're just not consistent enough. They've got the players. I mean, that Chicago team, I'll admit, obviously big Lakers guy, but I'm just a big fan of the league. And this Bulls team is one of the most exciting teams overall to watch in the last few years. I think they really have it figured out on both ends of the ball, and I think they really have it figured out in different areas of offense and defense. I think that they're one of the most exciting teams that I've seen in the last few years, and I really do think they'll be a team to make a push within the next few seasons. But I do see them being an early playoff exit, because of exactly what you said. That record, it doesn't look good. They can handle all those other teams just fine, but I mean, we just saw them play the Bucks, and it was not pretty. I mean, obviously, like you said, injury bug code, everything is kind of going around and not working in their favor. But play a team like the Bucks, and I still think no matter who they have, they're not going to be a team that can really keep up with them, especially in a 7-game series.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to rant a little bit about my Bulls, right? This has been the most exciting Bulls team since the Derrick Rose Bulls from 2010 to 2015. We haven't sniffed, I keep saying we, but the Bulls have not sniffed the playoffs in the last few seasons, and it's been maddening to watch. The lone bright spot before this year is Zach LaVine. And it was one of those situations is this just a good player putting up stats on a bad team?
Mm-hmm.
But this current Bulls brass of Arturas Karnisovas, Mark Eversley has really turned this team around. They brought in a good coach, Billy Donovan. They brought in some players. The Nikola Vucevic trade took me by surprise. It was a pleasant surprise. I've been a fan of Vuce. He's also a little bit of my whipping boy at times, but they put some great pieces around LaVine. Bringing in DeMar DeRozan, which the Lakers could have had him, but decided that Westbrook was a better option. Thank you, Rob Pelinka and LeBron James for DeMar DeRozan, who I do have in my top 10 in the MVP race, number 10, but he's still there.
Yeah.
They bring in a couple other former Lakers. I'm not saying this to make it sting, but you got Lonzo Ball, who's currently out with the knee injury, and Alex Caruso, who's quickly becoming a cult hero here in Chicago. All those pieces have made this team exciting to watch. In the first half of the year, it was great. One thing that always worried me, even when the Bulls were winning earlier this year, is, and no one does this in the NBA, is play defense. Their pick and roll defense and their rotations are atrocious. They'll always get to the first guy, they'll get to the second guy, but the defense doesn't rotate to those corner threes and leaves good shooters open and leaves teams that shouldn't be in ball games, right? Then, you had the COVID situation where it seemed like everybody on the team had COVID, except for a couple players, and even, had the league stop their schedule for about a week or two earlier in December. But then the Caruso injury was huge. The second Caruso injury with Grayson Allen, huge. The Lonzo Ball injury, the fact that Lonzo Ball isn't back yet scares me as a Bulls fan. He's turned into a good shooter, great shooter, actually. He provides length on the floor, great passer, just great basketball IQ. And we need another good defender on the floor there. And that's what the Bulls have lacking. I think the Bulls have also played down to competition at times. But the biggest stat, like I mentioned a moment ago, was 0-16. That sticks out in my head. I'm sure it sticks out in their head too. I mean, DeMar DeRozan even alluded to it the other day. They have to beat good teams. It's great if you make the playoffs, and it's an accomplishment for this franchise after being out the last 3 or 4 seasons. But, you don't make the playoffs just to show up, especially in the NBA. Everybody wants to win. Right now, I'm worried that they might fall to the play-in. I mean, right now I think they're 5th or 6th in the East, but they're free falling. They're only 3-10 after the All-Star break. I'm worried that they're going to run DeMar DeRozan into the ground. He's had an outstanding season, a bounce-back season. Nobody really was expecting this. They thought he was on the decline at age 32, but he's putting up career highs in points. He's been the Bulls' go-to guy, and that was expected to be Zach LaVine, who's been a great number 2, and he's probably better suited for that number 2 role. But the one thing, the injuries, missing Lonzo Ball, and another thing that scares the hell out of me is Nikola Vucevic. Great player, all-star player. I like him, but sometimes he just drives me nuts. Was settling for too many threes that, in the beginning of the season. He can hit them, but he's probably at about 33-34% from 3, which is his lowest in a few years. He's not the best defender in the world. He's not a fleet of foot. Solid defender, but when you're going up against Joel Embiid's in the world, the Giannis's in the world, even Evan Mobley from Cleveland, the rookie who may be the rookie of the year, who knows? Vooch was having issues with. Is that going to be enough? Is that going to be enough to have the Bulls win a series? I want to say yes. My heart says yes, but my head says no.
I mean, and that's fair. Everything you said is very true. Obviously, I'm not even a Bulls fan, and it's just exciting to see the team that they have. Lonzo, not super upset that we lost him. Didn't really fit, I think, the Lakers' plan. Obviously, it ended up being good for us. We got our championship with that trade. Huge reason we got that was obviously getting Anthony Davis. Caruso was different for me because Caruso was such a great player, and like you said, like he's like a cult hero, and like he started that in LA, like started that like reputation, and it's only grown in Chicago, honestly. I mean, there were all those memes when he went there of like him next to Michael Jordan and stuff. I mean, just so much, and like, the jokes are funny, but he also can hoop. I mean, he's a player that is earning himself a really like iconic name and an iconic idea of who he is because of what he brings. And we're seeing that even more on this Bulls team. And I mean, obviously it's hurting the Lakers not to have him. Obviously, I'll take him back right now. I'll take a lot of players, honestly, at this point. But I think that I do think that there'll be a team that will show out in the playoffs and show where they're going to be at for the future. But I don't think that's going to formulate into wins. Will they make it past their first round? Will they make it past the first round? Most likely, I can see them making it through one series, but I think they'll be limited to one successful series. And then even if it's a hard-fought series, the next one, I think they'll find themselves exiting. I don't think they'll be a finals team, but I think they'll definitely be a team. And just seeing them in the playoffs again is cool. And awesome to see Bulls fans, either way, fan of the league or just a Bulls fan. It's cool to see them back in because they're just so iconic. But I mean, they are only 4 games away from that 8th place spot, and that's that Nets team. So yes, they still have that 5th place standing, but Cavs are one game behind them, Raptors are one game behind them, and then right at eighth is four. So they need to fight for the rest of this season, or they are going to see themselves in that play-in, and they should make it out of the play-in if they make it there. But I mean, some of those play-in teams, Hawks, Hornets, Nets, Raptors, those are some intense competitive teams. So you're not safe just because you were the fifth seed or you were the first seed.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting to see. They really need to fight for the rest of their season, especially to make it to the playoffs and be a team that's just in would be an accomplishment. And then going forward, pushing for that championship, I definitely think will happen.
Well, we shall see. I'm going to be sitting here on heart attack watch here, watching the Bulls over the last few weeks of the season to see where they end up in the playoff picture. Fingers crossed that they avoid that play-in. I don't want no part of the Brooklyn Nets right now, especially with Kyrie coming back full time here. So we shall see. Well, the Bulls are definitely one of my surprise teams. I knew they would be improved. A lot of experts had the Bulls kind of at that 7-8 seat, which they very well could be there.
Yeah,
But right, even being at the top of the Eastern Conference standings for the longest time, I don't think anybody in the NBA saw that coming before all the injuries and all that. So the Bulls are definitely one of my surprise teams. We'll talk about that more as far as surprise teams go here. I think the Memphis Grizzlies, Taylor Jenkins has done an amazing job coaching that young team. I don't even know if they have any old-time vets. I think their oldest player on the team is Steven Adams. I think he's somewhere around 28, 29 years old. But they've been fun. Memphis has been fun to watch. They've had a bunch of guys that, that grit and grind is coming back, but with a new school flair. A bunch of guys that other teams didn't want. I mean, look at Desmond Bane. That guy, I mean, great defender, great shooter, coming out of TCU. A lot of teams passed him up. You have Dylan Brooks. He's a second-round draft pick out of Oregon. A lot of teams didn't want him either, obviously, if he's a second-round pick. Jaren Jackson Jr. as a lottery pick, balling out. You have John Morant. We talked about him a moment ago. They just have a lot of good pieces, a lot of good young players. And it's going to be scary to play the Memphis Grizzlies this year and the next few years. So I have Memphis as one of my surprise teams as well. Another surprise team that was even more, of a shock more than the Bulls and the Grizzlies, the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yep,
I mean, who had the Cleveland Cavaliers competing for a playoff spot, especially after Colin Sexton went down with a season-ending injury? A lot of good pieces. At first, I was questioning what Kobe Altman was doing over there in Cleveland, putting together a lot of big guys. You got Kevin Love. There's questions on whether or not he was going to get traded. You got, our old friend here in Chicago, Lauri Markkanen, which wasn't sad to see him go, but the kid can shoot lights out.
Yeah.
He can't defend worth a lick, but he can shoot lights out. Evan Mobley is going to be special. A lot of similarities to Chris Bosh. I think he might even be better at some point. I guess that's my mini hot take on Evan Mobley. But with Darius Garland being a first-time All-Star, I mean, that Cleveland team, if they can keep this up, give Coach Bickerstaff some credit, though. That team, major surprise this year.
Absolutely.
And, I think no one else saw the Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl Anthony Towns. He actually made my top 10 MVP list. He's at, I think, 6 for me, actually, right now. Anthony Edwards, athletic freak. The addition of Patrick Beverley. That dude is nuts. Great on-ball defender. But I think everybody had the Timberwolves on the outside looking in. Right now, I believe it looks like they're at the 7th seed in the West. Sure, they can make it into the play-in game, but, I mean, did you have the Timberwolves competing in the West, and who did you have as your surprise teams?
Timberwolves, honestly, I did not have them being where they're at. I think I kind of had them as a team where I was like, they're going to be a great team going forward in the future, but they're going to take a few years to formulate. But we've seen them put up some big wins against some of these top teams, and they've shown that they belong in the top 8 by far. They're a team that is really etching their name in this playoff contention race. They're a team that I think would be able to compete in the playoffs if they make it into the actual playoff race. I think that they really will compete. Obviously, they probably won't make it very far in the playoffs, but just making the playoffs would be huge for the Timberwolves because they're not a team that has seen that much success really honestly ever in their NBA. I mean, obviously they had Kevin Garnett and they had a couple of decent years, but the Timberwolves have never really been that successful of a team. So if we really see them build themselves up like I think they are, then they're going to be that team to look out for. But I did not have them sitting at seventh and sitting pretty comfortably at seventh too. 43 and 20 or 32, and the Clippers eighth. 36 and 39. So this Timberwolves team is seventh, and they're seventh by a pretty good amount, a pretty comfortable margin.
Yeah, yeah.
Cavs is the one that shocked me. I know we talked about that briefly. Cavs, I remember at the beginning of the year, I was like, another 25-win season on the way. But I mean, talk about 41, not 25, but 41 wins. And some of their wins have came against some of the best teams in the NBA. They're another team just like the Timberwolves who have been playing the best teams and having some of the best outcomes. So Cavs are a shock. And their system, it's really old school. I really like the way that coach runs that team because to me, it's an old school basketball team that's really a lot more focused on physicality. I mean, they've got a really big roster and they really focus in on a lot of like physicality and things that might be lacking or just different in the NBA now. So honestly, I think that this Cavs team is a team that's just going to be so exciting to watch the rest of this season and going forward. On the other end, looking at teams that surprised me in their underperforming way, obviously the Lakers are on there, but the Knicks are sitting at 11. And I mean, I'm going to be honest, after last season, I bought into the Knicks craze. I was like, this is a team that I can see being top five next year. I mean, I really put a lot in on the Knicks. I was like, the Knicks are back. Well, just like in Knicks fashion, they showed us that they're definitely not. So anytime we think that they might be on their way back, they show us that they're not. So surprised. They're 4 games back from 10th. They can maybe get into the plan. I don't think they'll make it past the plan, but Knicks surprised me in an underwhelming way. And then another team that surprises me in an underwhelming way is the Pacers. Obviously, they've lost some pretty big pieces and made some changes, but they're not a team you expect to be 13th and only win 25 games. I mean, they're not a 25-win team. I really thought that they were a team that etched themselves in the top 10 pretty consistently. So surprised in that sense. Another team that kind of surprises me is the Trailblazers. They've also been a team that have been on like that back half, but they've still been a team that's competed, and they're 12th and 27 and 46. They're not making even the play-in. Honestly,
No.
I mean, they're not that far off of the Spurs, but I think Damian Lillard just announced the other day, or it was just announced that he's out for the season. So, I mean, that's him. That's him showing he's. I'm not going to say I think he'll leave the Trailblazers because obviously he's shown so much loyalty, but I think he's starting to be a little more aware of the situation he's in.
Yeah.
And I think him
Yeah.
sitting shows that. So Trailblazers kind of surprised me. I thought they'd at least be in that top 10 spot. So those are some teams that have surprised me in that sense as well.
Yeah. Well, it also doesn't help your team's record and help you compete is when you trade away all your good players. Trading. I mean, they had to do it though. I mean, I see, CJ McCollum being traded to the Pelicans, and all, the Pelicans were left for dead, and all of a sudden they're going to be playing in the play-in, most
Yeah,
likely. The Pacers trading Domantas Sabonis to the Kings, that one was head scratching to me. I mean,
same.
yes, I agree they've underperformed all year, but you get a talent like that, you lock them up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure, they're a mid-market team, but they could have paid Domantas Sabonis.
And they should.
That absolutely, absolutely. But I will say this about the Pacers: they got back a couple decent pieces. Tyrese Halliburton's going to be a player. He's already shown flashes of that. Buddy Hield, I'm hot and cold on him. A good shooter, but that's pretty much it. But the Pacers are trying to set themselves up for the future, but unfortunately, it looks like rebuilds in Indy and Portland for both of those teams. But I don't know if anything beats Tristan Thompson's tribute and thank you for when he left the Pacers after being with them for a whole 72 hours, thanking Pacers fans. I mean, come on, this is something right
Uh,
off the script of the Kardashians, man. Uh,
He's living in that world now. He definitely
yeah,
he keeps himself in headlines, but not for basketball usually.
yeah. Luckily for us in Chicago, he's on the Bulls.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, well, you know what else is just as surprising? I'm sure you found this shocking was the little altercation on the Miami Heat's bench during a timeout here in the last week during a loss. And for those of you that haven't seen it, there's video of Jimmy Butler and Heat head coach Eric Spoelstra getting into it, and a lot of videos circulating in Montana. We were talking about this a little bit before the podcast recording here. There's some videos with some interesting closed captions, and basically Eric Spoelstra is seen looking at Jimmy Butler and saying, "Wait, you want to fight me?" Something along those lines. And Udonis Haslam coming in straight in and saying and offering, "Hey, listen, I'll fight you. I'll beat your
Mhm.
ass." What did you think of that whole situation? Because that was something else.
First of all, I mean, Haslam has been with that team for so long. You don't step up on him because he is, at the end of the day, he is really that leader for that team just because of his longevity. Yes, obviously Jimmy Butler, great player, pretty solid leader when he wants to be. But I think
Yes,
I think it was just a really intense moment. I think that they've been underperforming, and I think Coach Bolstra said in a post game interview, like, we're all such a competitive group that things were just really heated, but there's no real issue. And I mean, honestly, the closed captions that I saw, it's hard to believe that there's not an issue with what was being said.
sure.
Obviously, Spolster's not going to show if there is an issue on the inside. He's not going to give the media that because they'll just run with that, especially with Jimmy Butler, who's already had a couple other exits and things with other teams. They'll have a field day with it if they get a hold of anything the coach Spo says. So he didn't go in too much. I don't think it's anything that's going to ruin their playoff run. I think they're going to have a solid team and they're going to come together because they have a great team. That's a scary team that,
They're first in the East,
yeah, that's a
not by
team
much,
that
but they're first right
they're
now.
right there. No, they're right
Yeah,
there. And they've got it's only a 1 game difference, but still that the East is so close. Having a 1 game difference is a huge deal. So I think they're a great team that'll still see success. But I definitely think that going forward after this season, we might see some players leaving or some changes in certain things because it looked like a pretty intense altercation. But I think Jimmy Butler was just having a moment and kind of stepped up on Coach Spolstra, and then obviously Haslam's going to put a stop to that, and then it kind of went from there. And
yeah.
luckily, it didn't turn into anything more than just words. There wasn't any actual altercation physically, but it looked like it got pretty close. People were holding
Oh yeah,
people back, and but I mean, at the same time, you want people that get that intense about winning on your team. It's just you need
sure.
to use it the right way, and I think Jimmy Butler has used it incorrectly multiple times. So I don't dislike Jimmy Butler. I respect him. I think he's a great player, but I do think he's had a couple of run-ins with certain things because of how intense he gets. And
Sure.
especially on a team like the Heat and with Haslam and Coach Spo, two legends in Miami, you don't step up on them like that. When you've been there,
Yeah.
what, 3-4 years, you don't really have that position and you don't have that. So I think Butler was in the realm because he really was the person that started that situation. But I don't think it'll affect them going forward.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I told my coach that I wanted to fight him. And in biddy ball back when I was 10 years old, he was much bigger than me, and I'm pretty sure he kicked my ass. A couple things. I'll touch on Jimmy Butler a little bit here in a second, but um, that was just a surreal scene. I mean, look, I'm not one that promotes violence. However, I would have loved to see Udonis Haslam and or Eric Spoelstra take on Jimmy Butler. I'd want to see Spo mix it up
Oh
because
yeah,
I mean the Heat were getting beat by double digits. Give the Miami fans something, some sort of entertainment already. Like, come
some
on,
type of show.
they're holding back UD, they're holding back Spo. Let them go. I don't think Jimmy Butler. I have a lot of respect for Jimmy Butler. He's a self-made man, and I'll get to that in just a second here. I don't think he can fight. I really don't. I don't know if Eric Spoelstra can fight. I think he's learned pretty well under Pat Riley and being intense and being a good leader in that whole
Mhm.
Miami Heat culture and things of that nature. But yeah, I'd like to see Spo fight. Let's see it. If he's going to sit there and be like, "Wait, you want to fight me?" and keep stepping up on him, I mean, let UD loose. He's not playing. He's not doing anything else. Let him get a sweat in.
That's
But
true.
but all in all seriousness, I mean, luckily nothing really happened and it didn't boil over. It obviously didn't lead them to victory. You think those things are the type of thing that could galvanize a team and help
Mhm.
bring them back. A lot of times, like coaches getting technicals on purpose to pump up their team. I like Greg
Yeah,
Popovich winking on his way out after being ejected, things of that nature. But definitely a surreal scene there in Miami. I will say this about Jimmy Butler though. Jimmy Butler. is a solid basketball player. We had him here in Chicago. He was a late first round draft pick. When he was drafted out of Marquette, I didn't know who he was. If he was to walk down the street, I had no idea who the kid was. But he improved and he got more out and more opportunity, especially under Tom Thibodeau each season he was here. Excuse me. He was a humble kid at first, didn't really say much. He just put in the work. I mean, he worked his ass off to get to where he is. So from that spot, I respect the hell out of Jimmy Butler. Self-made man, 30th draft pick, not much expected of him, and all of a sudden he's a multi-time All-Star. To your point, though, he has burned a few bridges, or at least it looks like he's burned a few bridges. Obviously, the Bulls didn't have any trouble trading him away to Minnesota a few years ago, and the Bulls got back Zach LaVine, who luckily still with the team, a draft pick that take him. But one short playoff appearance with the Chicago reunion in Minnesota with Derrick Rose and Taj Gibson going up there, that was nice to see. But after that, soon thereafter, the following season, Minnesota's like, we can't have this guy. We want to keep Cat around. We got to pay that guy, the young guy, the young big here. So they quickly shipped Butler off to Philly. And I really thought that Philly team was going to do some special things with him, with Ben Simmons, with Joel Embiid. In fact, I was in Philly for Jimmy Butler's first game at Wells Fargo Arena against the Utah Jazz. It just did, kind of disappointment there. Philly was quick to get rid of him too. I mean, he was getting into it. It seems like he's still close with Joel Embiid, but he was getting into it with Ben Simmons and some of those other guys and the coaches, especially Brett Brown when he was there. They couldn't handle him either. Then, the sign and trade to Miami, which, thought that it was going to be a good fit for the Heat culture. Pat Riley is a madman. That dude is crazy, but he gets things done. That whole Miami Heat culture they build down there. I didn't think Eric Spoelstra was much of a coach when he first got the head coaching job, but he worked his way up through that organization. A lot of respect for him there. Won a couple chips with the big three with D Wade, LeBron, and Chris Bosh. LeBron should be in the Heat, and D Wade should be thanking Ray Allen for that miraculous three. I think in 2013.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, but Spo's one of the best coaches in the league. I think he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was named one of the all-time coaches as well during All-Star Weekend. But man, if that would have been an interesting fight to see him and Jimmy Butler. But I don't know. It's a good thing for Jimmy Butler. UD didn't get a hold of him. I mean, he's one of those guys in the league that I'm trying to think of other guys in the league today that you do not want to get in a fight with. Another one comes to mind is Montrezl Harrell. I think that dude's super intense, and I wouldn't want to be caught in an alley with him, pissed off.
No.
I don't know about you, but any other names that come to your mind of guys that you think could fight in the NBA?
One that comes to mind is one that we saw have an altercation earlier this season with a player, Nikola Jokic. I think he is a player that would be. I mean, we saw him. I think it was on the more. Was it Morris Senior? It was some player at the beginning of the season.
One of the Morris twins. Yep.
Yeah, yep. Went up behind him and just really he landed on the ground pretty hard, and he was out with a neck injury from that for a little while. I think Jokic seems like he could fight, not even just because of that. There's been times when you've seen mini altercations and players don't really approach him like they approach maybe some other Nuggets players and just some other players in general, because I think I think he would be someone you wouldn't want to fight, especially after seeing him run up on Morris and really lay that in. I mean, that was he hit the ground hard, and obviously he ran up on him, but had it been like an actual face-to-face fight, I still think Jokic would have been the same outcome, honestly, because Nikola just seems like a pretty scary guy that you wouldn't want to fight, at least when the intensity is high during a basketball game. Obviously he's really funny, and I've seen some of his post-game interviews, and he seems like a really just funny, nice guy, but when it's intense, I don't think you want to mess with Jokic.
No, and he's got his brothers at every game. So if you're fighting Jokic, you're fighting the Jokic brothers as well. I don't know if I want to mess with those guys.
I don't think I would.
You know what? He didn't even come up on my list, but you make a good point, and just for his brothers too. Another guy that comes to mind for me, Patrick Beverley. He's scrappy. I don't know if he can fight, but I don't know. He's kind of on my right there in the middle for me. I don't know.
I think he's all talk. I mean, I'm speaking at it from a point of I've hated him on the Clippers when he was on the Clippers. I hated him for so long. Like I was like, my goal is to go to a Lakers Clippers game just to cheer against Patrick Beverly. I mean, obviously I want to see the Lakers, but he just got on my nerves. But that's what he does. He wants to get on your nerves, so he does a good job of that. I mean, he reminds me of like a '90s basketball player who can
Yes.
really talk and then brings that
Yes.
intensity as well. So my whole thing is like because he talks so much, some people that talk that much can't actually show up in an actual fight, but
Yeah.
he could very well show up in an actual fight. And he talks so much. If he can fight like he talks, then he'd be someone I wouldn't want to come up on a
Yeah.
fight with either, because
Oh,
he's very vocal and very intense. And if he can throw that in with like a fight, but I don't think he's ever really gotten into an actual altercation. I
there are no
don't think
real
it was
fights in the NBA. They
yeah,
just jaw on each
right.
other's faces, throw a couple fake
Mhm.
punches, and that's the end of it.
That's
Well,
true.
I think Patrick Beverly definitely makes the all pest team. I think it's Pat Bev. I think Rajon Rondo. He's still
Mhm.
playing. He's on with Atlanta now. He's definitely on the all pest team.
Yeah.
Grayson Allen's another guy that I don't
Mhm.
think he can fight, but he's definitely a pest. And I say
Absolutely.
pest in jest, not trying to rhyme or rap here, but those are the type of guys that you want on your team, but you
Mhm.
hate to play against.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
maybe that'll be a topic for another podcast. The
That's
All
awesome.
NBA Pest Team,
Oh, there'd be a
brought to
lot
you
of
by. All right, everyone. Apologies, had some technical difficulties, but we are back. We were talking about in jest, obviously, because we at Well Beyond the Arc do not really want to promote violence. But if something were to happen, we're talking about the guys in the NBA that we definitely wouldn't want to be in a fight with. The best fighters we think in the NBA. We talked about Udonis Haslem, talked about Montrezl Harrell, Nikola Jokic, and his brothers also mentioned. Patrick Beverly, we're both kind of, I don't know, more talk, more bark than bite. But we have a good all pest team, which we'll probably have to put that together for a future podcast. So guys like Patrick Beverly, Rajon Rondo, Grayson Allen, who I am still not forgiving for completely taking out Alex Caruso in Milwaukee earlier this year, partially blaming him for derailing a little bit of the Bulls season. So don't think anybody in Chicago will be buying Grayson Allen any drinks or dinner anytime soon.
definitely not. He's one of those players that he's played dirty his whole career. We saw Duke. We saw a couple of very obvious like trips or like pushes. I mean, he's just a player that does that and gets away with it. So he's definitely a player that you don't want to go up against some of your best players, because if he can't stop him, he'll just try to injure him. So that's kind of
Trip,
his.
bite,
Yeah.
elbow, not go for the ball, break their wrists.
Yeah, typical stuff from a player like that. So it's just
Yeah.
kind of how that goes. But yeah,
Yeah.
he's definitely a player that would make that list for me as well.
All right. Well, we hope you guys have enjoyed the first installment of well-being sources like Spotify. More to come on that. But until next time, be sure to check out the sportspageblog.com in Montana, your other podcast.
Yeah, make sure to check out the Connor and Heffernan show
You
on
guys, time
Spotify.
out. Time out.
No.
Hit that ending again. You froze up and we didn't hear you until you came back and told Montana to go on.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about
No. It's okay. I'll see if I remember what I said. All right. I'll just shit to the wall. Okay.
you can just do the whole thing over again, because as soon as you said thanks for what, and then you were gone.
Got it. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining us here on our first ever episode and installment of Well Beyond the Arc, part of the Yankee and Brit Sports Group. Be sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, and other avenues where podcasts are available. We'll share more on that as we get that information. Be sure to check out my blog, thesportspageblog.com. And Montana, your other podcast?
Yep. Check out my other podcast at The Connor and Heffernan Show, currently on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Podbean, Apple Music pending, but that's at The Connor and Heffernan Show.
All right. Well, I hope you guys join us next time. We will talk to you soon. And until then, do everything you can to avoid Grayson Allen. He will kick you, scratch you, bite you, and may break your wrist. See you guys.